In the dawn of Middle-earth, when darkness first stirred and evil took root, there stood one who chose love over immortal bliss. Melian, a divine being of ancient power, descended from the undying lands to walk among mortals. Her songs could weave dreams and her wisdom could pierce the veils of time, but it was her heart that would forge the greatest defense against Morgoth's shadow. This is the tale of Melian, the queen who outwitted the first enemy. Before the rise of Morgoth's dark fortress, the first stone of Doriath was laid. Melian dwelt in Valinor, a land of perfect peace. She was one of the Maya, lesser spirits of the Ainur who had existed before the shaping of the world, woven from the thought of Ilúvatar himself. In those ancient days, she served Este the Gentle, who gave rest and healing, and Vana the Ever-Young, who made flowers bloom and birds sing. Among all those who served the Valar, none were more beautiful, more wise, nor more skilled in song and enchantment than Melian. In Valinor, she tended the gardens of Lórien, where her songs eased the wearied spirits who sought rest beneath the silver-leafed trees. Working alongside Urmo, the master of dreams, she wove gentle visions for the sleeping and guided their wandering thoughts through paths of peace and healing. As the golden and silver light of the two trees touched the lands of Valinor, Melian's voice would rise in song. When she sang, the very world seemed to pause and listen. The Valar themselves held her song in great regard, and the birds of Valinor gathered in silence, their own voices hushed in reverence. Then came the awakening of the Quendi, the firstborn children of Ilúvatar, beside the waters of Cuivianen. Morgoth's shadow had already begun to stalk these lands, seeking to corrupt the firstborn before they could reach their full power. His dark servants hunted the unwary, and fear grew among the elves. It was then that the Valar decided to act, summoning the elves to the safety of Valinor, away from Morgoth's growing influence. Melian watched as the first waves of elves began their great journey westward, but as the last host prepared to depart, she set forth across the great sea to the forests of Middle-earth. Little record remains of why she abandoned the light of Valinor. Some say she was drawn by the wild beauty of Middle-earth's untamed woods, so different from the cultivated gardens of the Blessed Realm. Others believe she carried a secret task from the Valar themselves, to guard and guide the elves who chose to remain behind. Yet a few whisper that she had glimpsed her fate in prophetic dreams, seeing a glimpse of love that awaited her in the starlit lands. After leaving the light of Valinor, Melian came to the forest of Nan Elmoth, which stood dark and deep in Middle-earth, its ancient trees growing tall and black, their branches woven so tight that no starlight penetrated their canopy. Her songs pierced the darkness of Nan Elmoth, stirring life in the shadows where nothing had grown before. Where she walked, flowers bloomed between ancient roots, and her voice wove spells that rippled through the very fabric of the forest. Even the oldest trees bent their branches to her will, their leaves whispering secrets of ages past. While Melian's songs echoed through the dark boughs, another power drew near. Elwë, lord of the Teleri, led his people through these shadowed woods. His host was the largest of the Eldar, and his people were known as the Lindar, the singers, for their deep love of music and the sea. His hair shone silver in what little light filtered through the leaves as he scouted ahead of his people. Behind him stretched a long line of elves carrying torches, their lights creating islands of brightness in the perpetual gloom. They were answering the call of the Valar, making their way toward the distant shores of Belegheir, where Ulmo's ships would carry them across the great sea to Valinor. Through the deep shadows of Nan Elmoth, Elwë heard a song that made him pause mid-step. As he and his hunters searched for game to feed their traveling host, the melody pierced the gloom, a song of such beauty he had never experienced. Without a word to his companions, Elwë strayed from the hunting party, drawn into the forest's heart. His guards called after him, but their voices grew distant as he followed the enchanting sound. In a clearing where moonflowers bloomed impossibly in darkness, Elwë found her. Melian stood surrounded by her nightingales, her form giving off a gentle radiance that pushed back the shadows. As their eyes met across the space, time itself appeared to pause. No word passed between them. No word was needed. Elwë stepped forward, drawn by a power greater than his own will. Melian reached out, and as their fingers touched, both fell into a trance deeper than sleep, yet lighter than death. The trees of Nan Elmoth grew around them as they stood, frozen in that first moment of meeting. Seasons passed. Years turned. New trees sprouted, grew to maturity, and shed countless leaves around their still forms. The Teleri searched in growing desperation for their missing lord. Some, unwilling to abandon their leader, made camp nearby, their temporary settlements slowly taking root and becoming permanent. Others, led by Elwë's brother Olwe, continued their journey west to fulfill their original purpose, to reach Valinor and dwell in the light of the two trees. Decades passed as Elwë and Melian remained locked in their enchanted communion, while the world changed around them. In the Year of the Trees, 1152, after decades of silence, Elwë and Melian stirred from their trance. They found their familiar clearing transformed. Saplings had grown into mighty trees, moss had crept over forgotten paths, and seasons of fallen leaves had changed the very shape of the land. As Elwë opened his eyes, starlight seemed to shine from within them, changed forever by his communion with the divine. He rose first, offering his hand to Melian, and where their feet touched the earth, the forest responded. Dark corners that once harbored threats now whispered with enchantment, and shadows danced like gentle spirits around them. Together they walked the changed paths of their realm, and the watching elves who had waited for their lord saw not just their king returned, but a being transformed. Elwë Singolo, now taking the name Elu Thingol, ready to lead his people in this twilight realm. Under Melian and Elwë's joint power, scattered camps transformed into organized settlements. The Teleri who remained accepted Melian as their queen, as they saw how she and Elwë ruled together in perfect harmony, bringing both protection and prosperity to their people. Their realm was first called Eglador, the land of the Forsaken. He took thought, therefore, how he should make for himself a kingly dwelling, and a place that should be strong if evil were to awake again in Middle-earth. And he sought aid and counsel among the dwarves of Belegost and Noldor, who came forth from the mountains and delved for him great halls underground in Menegroth, the 1,000 caves. But as their power grew, so did the need for a stronghold worthy of their people. Elwë, now called Thingol, foresaw that peace in these lands would not last forever. His gaze turned to the heart of their realm, where the river Escaldwin cut through the forest of Region. Here, the swift waters had carved deep into ancient limestone, creating vast caverns beneath towering cliffs. When word reached him of the dwarves' skill in shaping stone, they sent messengers to the dwarven halls of Belegost and Noldor in the Blue Mountains. The Norgrim came, their master craftsmen walking the caverns with knowing eyes, seeing in the raw stone the potential for greatness. They met with Thingol, and an agreement was struck. The Norgrim would delve and carve, creating halls of unsurpassed beauty, and Thingol would reward them with precious treasures, including pearls that came from Círdan. The Norgrim had never before seen such pearls, and prized them greatly. The dwarven master craftsmen set about their work with zeal, delving deep into the rock, shaping room after room. The central hall, destined to become the heart of the palace, rose high with great stone arches, while countless chambers branched outward, each carved with the supreme skill of the Norgrim. Throughout the halls, stone columns rose like the trunks of mighty trees, their craft reflecting both the strength of the mountain and the grace of the forest. Thus was born Menegroth, the 1,000 caves, a marvel that would become the heart of their growing realm. The peace of Doriath was destined to be tested. In Valinor, far across the sea, the Valar released Morgoth from his 3 ages of imprisonment. For years he walked freely among the Valar and Eldar, feigning friendship and humility. Yet in secret his malice grew. Under the cover of darkness, he stole away to the shadowed ravine of Avathar, where dwelt Ungoliant, an ancient evil in spider form. Together they plotted, and when the Valar gathered for their greatest feast, all defenses lowered in celebration, they struck at the heart of Valinor itself. While songs of joy filled the air, Ungoliant wove her webs of darkness around the two trees. Morgoth pierced their bark with his spear, and Ungoliant drank their light, spewing forth such darkness as had never been known before. In that blackness, deeper than night, Morgoth had fled northward to Formenos, slaying Finwë the High King of the Noldor and stealing the Silmarils. Then, through darkness, they fled east, crossing the grinding ice of Helcarax into the outer lands of Middle-earth. Back in Valinor, Feanor, the creator of the Silmarils and son of Finwë, was filled with rage and grief over the murder of his father and the theft of his creations. Feanor and his sons had vowed, calling upon Iarlu Ilúvatar himself as witness, to pursue without mercy any who withheld the Silmarils from them, be they friend or foe, elf, man, or even the Valar themselves. Far in the north of Middle-earth, Morgoth had already reclaimed his ancient fortress of Angband. With his armies secured and the Silmarils in his grasp, he unleashed his forces upon Beleriand, marking the beginning of the first battle. His armies poured forth like a dark tide, splitting into two great hosts. The western force struck at the realms of Círdan near the coasts, while the eastern host drove deep into the heart of Beleriand, threatening the forests where Thingol's people dwelt. As the eastern army advanced, King Thingol rallied his forces. Aid came from an unexpected quarter. Denethor, lord of the Nandarin elves who had long dwelt secretly in Osiriand, arrived with his warriors to stand beside their Sindarin kin. The forests echoed with the clash of steel and the cries of battle as the combined might of Thingol and Denethor's forces drove back the servants of Morgoth with terrible losses. In the aftermath of the battle, Thingol withdrew his people deeper into the protected forests of Neldoreth and region. Standing upon the highest terrace of Menegroth, overlooking the bloodied fields of battle, Melian witnessed the burning settlements, the refugees fleeing through the forests, and the wounded being carried back from the front lines. She saw more than just the immediate aftermath of war. She then began to sing, not the joyful melodies that filled Doriath's halls, but ancient words of power from before the shaping of Arda. The air itself seemed to listen, shimmering with each note that fell from her lips. The enchantment spread outward like ripples across still water, but far more tangible. Where her power touched, the very nature of space began to shift and fold. The forests of Region and Neldoreth became suffused with her magic, their paths multiplying and shifting for any who would enter uninvited. The air grew thick, weaving an unseen wall around their realm. Throughout the years that followed, many of Morgoth's servants attempted to breach Doriath's borders, yet each time the girdle proved impenetrable. Those who approached with malice found themselves confused and lost, their purposes thwarted by powers beyond their comprehension. No force of arms, no cunning of spies, no evil device of Morgoth could overcome Melian's protection. The Dark Lord's armies, which had overrun so much of Beleriand, were forced to turn aside from Doriath's boundaries, unable to find paths through the mists that guarded the realm. Thus was born the Girdle of Melian, and the realm once known as Eglador, the land of the Forsaken, was transformed. Now it would be called Doriath, the guarded realm, and within its borders, the Sindar would find safety from the growing darkness of Middle-earth. Word reached Doriath of great hosts moving. The Noldor had returned to Middle-earth from Valinor. Their arrival heralded an even greater marvel, the first rising of the sun, marking the beginning of a new age. These were the exiled elves of the West, who had abandoned the Blessed Realm in pursuit of vengeance against Morgoth. Their coming brought both hope and disquiet to the lands of Beleriand. Among those who sought refuge in Doriath was Galadriel, daughter of Finarfin. Unlike many of her kin, she was granted entry through the Girdle of Melian, for she was kin to Thingol through her grandmother Eowyn, daughter of Olwe. In the gardens of Menegroth, beneath the carved stone branches that echoed the great forests above, Melian and Galadriel would often walk together. It was during these conversations that Melian's wisdom perceived shadows in the Noldor's tale of their return. Through careful questioning, Melian learned the full truth of their exodus, the Oath of Feanor, a vow of such terrible power that even the Valar themselves could not break it. More grievously, she discovered the dark deed at Alqualond, where the Noldor had slain their own kin, the Teleri, to seize their ships for the crossing to Middle-earth. Later, in the private chambers of Menegroth, Melian revealed these truths to her husband. Her voice carried the weight of grief as she spoke of Alqualond, where the Noldor had slaughtered Thingol's own kin, the very people his brother Olwë led, upon the shores of Valinor. Thingol's face darkened with each revelation, his anger building like a gathering storm. In his grief and anger, he made a momentous decree. The tongue of the Noldor, Quenya, was forbidden throughout his realm. All his people were to speak only Sindarin, the grey elven tongue. The ban extended beyond just his own realm. Even the Noldor who wished to have dealings with Doriath were required to learn and use Sindarin. From that day forward, none of the Noldor were permitted to enter Doriath, save only the children of Finarfin, for they were of Thingol's kin through their mother's lineage. In the year 465 of the First Age, a man named Beren, who had won the heart of Lúthien, stood before Thingol's throne seeking his daughter's hand in marriage. As Thingol demanded a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown as bride price, Melian warned him that this choice had bound Doriath to the fate of the Silmarils. Then Thingol was silent, and he looked long upon Lúthien, and he was troubled, for he knew that he could not change her will, and that her love was given to Beren beyond recall. Therefore he spoke slowly, saying, "A Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and who are you that would do this thing?" Melian watched as Beren and Lúthien set forth for Angband, driven by love and the daunting task of retrieving a Silmaril from the crown of the Dark Lord himself. In the ominous halls of Angband, Lúthien's dance and song cast a spell of deep sleep upon Morgoth and his court. Amidst this trance, Beren seized the moment to cut a Silmaril from the Iron Crown. As they fled from Angband, they encountered Carcharoth, the mightiest of wolves, bred by Morgoth himself for strength and malice. In a dire confrontation at the gates, Carcharoth bit off Beren's hand, which held the Silmaril. It began to burn him from the inside, causing immense pain and torment. This holy fire was not only a physical agony, but also a source of mental anguish, driving him to madness. Carcharoth's rampage brought him to the borders of Doriath. Carcharoth burst through, and for the first time since its creation, the Girdle of Melian parted. This breach led to the Great Hunt of the Wolf, where King Thingol himself, alongside Beren, Mablung, Beleg, and the great wolfhound Huan, pursued the maddened beast through the forests of Doriath. When they finally cornered Carcharoth, it was Huan who stepped forward to meet Carcharoth. The two beasts clashed with terrible force. Huan's bright coat against Carcharoth's dark fur, their snarls echoing through the forest. Though Huan's jaws found their mark in Carcharoth's throat, the great wolf's teeth also sank deep into Huan's flesh. Together they fell, locked in their death grip. From Carcharoth's torn belly, Beren managed to recover the Silmaril, which was still clutched in his severed hand, its light undimmed. Beren and Lúthien returned to Menegroth. In the halls of the Thousand Caves, they presented the Silmaril to King Thingol, fulfilling the impossible bride price he had demanded. As the years passed, Thingol grew ever more enchanted by the Silmaril's radiance. 3 decades after the Silmaril's return, Húrin strode into the halls of Menegroth, bearing the Nauglamir, a necklace of legendary beauty crafted by the dwarves in ages past, and Thingol conceived a vision of uniting these two greatest works of craft. In the year 503, he summoned the most skilled craftsmen from Nogrod to Menegroth, commanding them to set the Silmaril within the Nauglamir. The dwarves labored long at this task, their skill matching the greatness of the works they sought to combine. Yet when their work was complete, the dwarves, enchanted by the merged splendor of the Noldor and the Silmaril, claimed the necklace as their own, citing their labor as proof of ownership. Thingol, grown proud in the years since acquiring the Silmaril, responded with scorn to their claim. His haughty dismissal of their demands kindled the dwarves' anger into violence. The attack came without warning. In those stone chambers, far from Melian's immediate presence, the dwarves turned on Thingol. Their hearts, inflamed by both the insult to their craft and the overwhelming desire for the Silmaril, drove them to violence. Their tools, forged for creation, became weapons of murder. The king of Doriath, who had ruled since before the sun first rose, fell beneath their blades. His blood stained the floors of the realm he had built, while the Silmaril, cause of so much death, gleamed unchanged. Deep in her gardens, Melian felt the severing of her bond with Thingol. The power that had sustained her physical form for thousands of years wavered, and with it, the enchantments that had long protected Doriath. Throughout Doriath, the girdle that had protected the realm for ages began to fade like morning mist before the sun. In the great hall, where she had ruled beside Thingol for millennia, Melian walked one final time through Menegroth. As a Maya who had taken physical form through her love for Thingol, his death meant she could no longer maintain her earthly presence. Her form shimmered like starlight on water, her presence waning with each step through the halls she had helped build and protect. But Melian spoke no word, and her thought turned in silence to Beleriand, far away. Then she vanished out of their sight, and none of the elves saw her again in Middle-earth. Yet her bloodline would continue to shape the struggle against Morgoth. Her daughter Lúthien, blessed with unique powers born from the unprecedented union of Maya and elfkind, wielded magic through song and dance that even the Dark Lord could not resist, dealing the Dark Lord his greatest humiliation. The Silmaril passed to their son Dior, though his guardianship proved tragically brief, ending in the second kinslaying at the hands of the sons of Fëanor. His daughter Elwë preserved the jewel, fleeing to the havens of Sirion. There, her marriage to Elendil and their journey to Valinor with the Silmaril finally brought forth the Valar's intervention.